the Sega CD. Despite its dubious reputation, I found myself enjoying it immensely while it was on the market. With over 200 games, there were some real gems mixed in there, and some are still among my favorites of the 16-bit generation. Not so long ago, I did a video about the best games on the Sega CD, and I'll put a link to that down in the description so you can go check it out. But we aren't here to give praise to Sega's 16-bit CD attachment. This episode is all about the very worst games on the platform. No punches held. We are not doing any runner-ups or honorable mentions. This is the creme de la creme of absolute garbage. I have 16 categories that cover everything from fighting games to shoot-'em-ups. If you have ever wanted to know what you can skip on the Sega CD, this is the video for you. So sit back and get ready for the worst of the worst on the Sega CD. The full motion video list is a list of mostly bad games to begin with, so picking a worst of that bunch may seem daunting. It really wasn't, however, because the Lawnmower Man is spectacular in its awfulness. It's actually a sequel to the film, and Job has now reached his full potential as Cyber Job. You are trapped in VR and must find your way out playing crappy action sequences and solving terrible puzzles. Lots of quick deaths, tons of loading, and an interface that just isn't fun to use or navigate. I really did want to like it, but what's here offers little in the way of replay value. Even the full motion video quality is pretty bad. You can also play this on the PC, but I have no clue why you'd want to. It's probably the worst game to carry this license. You may be sitting there with a big WTF look on your face at this choice, but I stand by it. SLX CD is without question the worst use of scaling on the Sega CD. It's a combination of not just being visually unspectacular, but also a case of Sega themselves failing to add a bonus stage that truly took advantage and showed off the hardware. Running around Mode 7 style flatness trying to hit poorly scaled UFOs was not particularly fun or impressive. I mean, how can the tunnels in Batman Returns look like this and we are not getting something similar for the little blue blur to navigate? I absolutely adore SLX CD, but this bonus stage left a lot to be desired. This one right here might be another WTF moment, but again I stand by it. Golden Axe was part of the Sega Classics arcade collection and in general was a slightly upgraded port of what we received on the Genesis thanks to the addition of new digitized voices and music from the arcade original. That alone should have made it at least a noteworthy game for the Sega CD, right? Wrong, because this took out the freaking 2-player mode. That's right, man. The Sega CD Golden Axe is a one-player experience. This almost has to be an oversight or mistake, as the other games on the disc retain their multiplayer modes. There's just no excuse for this to be missing something so important to the Golden Axe experience. Deep diving games that were only released on the Sega CD and picking the worst one was not easy, but I settled on the truly terrible Revengers of Vengeance. Aside from the incredibly stupid name, this one had loads of potential. It's a hybrid fighting game and RPG, but it does neither well. Heck, I would have settled for both just being competent, but we just didn't get that lucky. The RPG portion is filled with the same simple task over and over that just leads to a ton of repetition. You start out so weak that challenging the CPU in battles is tantamount to slapping a bull in the face and standing there waiting for the ass whooping to ensue. Even just blocking a special attack takes 20% of your life. But as shallow as the RPG elements are, it's the fighting game that's outright broken. Game-jarring slowdown, lag, and unresponsive control makes this a headache no matter what you do. The AI is stupid but capable of crazy damage, the hit detection is an inch outside the sprite, and to get anywhere, you pretty much have to spam projectiles and throws without any other strategy. Don't let the colorful screens fool you, this is as painfully bad as games can get. There were not a ton of racing games on the Sega CD, but F1 Circus CD is my pick for the worst one. This could have been on the Genesis easily. I mean, the graphics engine here is as bare bones and as underwhelming as it gets. There's no real trackside detail at all, and other drivers pop in frame by frame right in front of you. Anyone expecting some beefy display of the Sega CD's hardware is in for a real letdown. It's funny because the racing engine has no scaling at all, but the title screen, map, and introductions do. The gameplay is also pretty tame, amounting to an experience that is easily crushed by Super Monaco GP on the base Genesis. It was only released in Japan for a 9,000 yen premium, and is a poor showing on a device that was damn near $500 itself. Play the first one on the Mega Drive called F1 Circus MD, at least there, it's what you expected. Talking about the worst sports game on the Sega CD still burns my ass up to this very day, because Joe Montana Football is one of the reasons I wanted the platform in the first place. I mean, a Sega Sports football title using sprite scaling. How could it be bad? Well, bad it was, because this choppy crapfest of a game did not deserve Joe Cool's name on it in the slightest. The passing game is broken, the run game is akin to playing ping pong against 11 opponents, and the graphics are just an F-tier pixelated dumpster fire. I would have rather have had a port of the cartridge game with full motion video touchdown celebrations. At least that would have been playable. For our worst adventure game, I chose the space adventure Cobra, the legendary Bandit. I actually get a kick out of this game and have enjoyed it in the past, but there is no question it's got all kinds of issues. This is what Snatcher would have been if Snatcher had sucked. It's basically space pirates doing dumb things while searching for treasure. The story seems like it was written by a 15-year-old, and the characters are about as interesting as a wet carrot. The art is weak and mostly stays in a small screen most of the game. Choose your own adventures need to draw you in with great animation, deep stories, and characters you care about, which Cobra here has absolutely none of. But it's definitely one of those so bad you want to see the ending kinda games. Many of you will play this just to see how ridiculous things can look and play out. But beware if you hate reading, most of the conversations are text. Star Wars Chess at its heart can be an enjoyable game if you cut off the animation and play it as simply a chess game. But anyone wanting to experience the actual reason to play this, the combat sequences, will quickly grow tired from its vicious load times. Struggling to get through a full game is maddening and takes just forever, as each and every move needs to load before you see it play out. That makes Star Wars Chess easily the worst strategy game on the Sega CD, thanks to its terrible technical shortcomings. Our worst RPG is a category I almost cut out completely, honestly. Every single RPG on the Sega CD rates well above something I'd consider terrible. That left me in the unenviable position of picking my least favorite RPG, Eye of the Beholder, as the entry. I'm not a big fan of the point-and-click style of exploration and battle, but it would be extremely unfair to label this the worst game just because of that. With that said, it isn't a bad game at all, it's just not my cup of tea. That leaves this category kind of a bust, but gives me the opportunity to preach that the Sega CD actually has a great lineup of RPGs. Go give them a look if you've never explored its offerings. Unfortunately, the fighting game genre had an easy pick for the worst game, and I'm pretty sure you all know what it is. Black Hole Assault is set in a world where Earth must battle for resources against an alien race. You'll use warbots known as cams to do it, and yeah, I don't care what else is going on here at all. All you need to know is that the gameplay is slow, wooden, unresponsive, and amounts to little more than jamming the 2 action buttons hoping to get some hits in. The back of the box talks up photorealistic graphics and a pumping soundtrack. What a load of crap. This looks no better than some Master System titles, and plays no better than the simplest of games on the market. I just don't understand how anyone expected to sell a CD attachment that cost hundreds of dollars with games like this. That Sega seal of quality should have had higher standards. There were a handful of fun shooters on the Sega CD. Heck, even a few of the full motion video shooters were passable. Not so with Microcosm. This one has you shrunken down and injected into a human body to stop a corrupt corporation from controlling its rival's mind. You fly along full motion video backdrops and shoot enemies across the heart, lungs, and brain in an effort to stop the bad guys. Your ship can move around and there are power-ups, but that's about as complicated as it gets. In the first 5 minutes you have seen everything this has to offer, and it's not compelling stuff. Even the video runs in the Sega CD's low color mode, so it looks quite rough even by the standards of the day. It was ported to many other gaming platforms where it looked infinitely better, but played just as boring. I had to fit in Wild Woody somewhere, so it gets the nod for worst platformer. Sophomoric humor aside, this poor playing title suffers from hit detection issues, cheap level design, and unwieldy control problems. What could have been a hilarious throwaway title to break out for your buddies winds up nothing more than a simplistic bore that shows off nothing the Sega CD was capable of. Action platformers were a dime a dozen during the 16-bit era, so why anyone at Sega thought this was good enough for the Sega CD in 1995 should be in every Business 101 class as how not to handle a failing product line. You can play it for the lulz, but coming back to this for anything else is a waste of time. While looking at the beat-em-ups on the Sega CD, I realized my list was quite small. I did have a real stinker though, and that was Sony ImageSoft's Dracula. This is a side-scrolling action game similar to what you'd see in something like Kung Fu Master or China Warrior, only this time it uses pre-rendered backgrounds to give you a sense of three-dimensional space. And man does it play rough. Repetitive enemies come at you fast and often, and your slow punches and kicks are ill-prepared for their advance. That means a lot of damage and deaths as you adjust to the laggy control. I admit I was intrigued by the visuals upon its release, and I did play it quite a bit, but after suffering those platforming sections and being killed by insects and rats numerous times, I grew really tired of it. To artificially extend gameplay, you also have to replay areas from the beginning at the very end. When I finally killed Dracula with simple punches and kicks, I was done. Enough was enough. I hate putting Night Striker on here because it can still be a decent night's entertainment, but let's be real, compared to the arcade it was butchered. Pixelated visuals and a poor frame rate just doesn't do the arcade version justice. I don't understand why this looks like this either. There are a number of better looking and running sprite scaling titles on the Sega CD. I mean, every game that had a bonus stage on the Sega CD had something that looked better than this. You can still enjoy it, but there's no question it's a terrible port visually. The worst sound and music category is tough on a CD system because so many games used Redbook audio. But my choice here was simple. All those Make My Video titles easily fit the bill. Put video segments together. That's it. Set to some of the worst garbage available at the time. These games were full-priced $50 releases. Imagine paying that for something where all you could do was mess with video clips of Mark Wahlberg rapping poorly. I can just see a room full of Sega executives sporting wood over the notion of this being the next big thing. It almost boggles the mind. Our final category is worst graphics, and I have been saving this turd so I can give it a proper beating. For a freaking year, all I read about in gaming magazines at the time was how the Sega CD could do this and that with sprite scaling, how it had its own powerhouse 68,000 CPU that was faster than the one in the Genesis, and how all that would come together to give us games that put the base Genesis to shame. And then we received Afterburner 3, one of the most visually disappointing releases that console ever saw. Here you get a game that was based on Strike Fighter, the sequel to G-Lock Air Battle. And just look at that flat, lifeless presentation. Hardly any detail on the ground or in the water. No Sega CD scaling hardware in use here at all. And once you put it beside the arcade, you really get a sense of just how big of a joke this port was. The Sega CD could do Mode 7-like effects, yet this didn't even try. No scaling on the enemies, no scaling on your missiles, no scaling on the smoke trails. Just a ho-hum experience the vanilla Genesis could have easily shat out in its earliest days on the market. CRI may have been responsible for this, but Sega published it in the West, putting their name on it like some badge of honor. It was uninspired, unimaginative, and downright lazy games like this that never gave the Sega CD any chance at widespread success. So there we go guys, my worst of the worst on the Sega CD. While I really did hold the platform in a much higher regard than most people, it did have its stinkers, and I think I covered most of the biggest offenders here. I know some of you have your own list, and I'd like to hear your picks for the various categories in the comments below. I also plan to do this type of episode for other platforms as well, and not just Sega. I think a bad games list like this tends to be more interesting because you only get one choice per genre, so it takes a bit more thought to put it together. As always, I'm sure some of you enjoyed these titles, so remember it's all in good fun and just one man's opinion. If we all like the same games, videos like these would be utterly pointless. I'm Sega Lord X, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.